So, Will, here we are by one of your fields full of young vines. Tell us, what have we got here in front? Because they're really very young shoots.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're currently standing in a field that's entirely Pinot Noir, and you're quite right, they are quite young. So these are in their second year of growing. So what we actually did is that they'd grown this high before, but we cut them down to two little shoots, little buds at the bottom, just so it would have the extra root development, so it would grow up even stronger. So what we're growing now is the permanent cane, which when you see a vineyard, they've got a bit of wood coming up and two little shoots coming off either side. We're growing that middle permanent wood at the moment. So next year we'll be taking canes off, and that's when we'll have our first harvest from the grapes here.
First harvest next year, because it's all looking really neat, all the rows, and you got the wire fencing, and they're protected at the base, and you can really tell it. So the whole idea about the rows that we see, you clearly haven't just plunked them, so what is the your way of making sure the spacing and things is right for the vines?
Well, when we planted them, which was, last year, the beginning of last year, we used a piece of equipment that was a GPS guided vine planter. It was a chap from Germany came down. He does the rounds. He follows up the planting season, and he got to us. So it's a small plough, opens up the ground, and it's got a wheel, and you put the vines in the wheel, and it uses GPS to plant them in exactly the right place. So it's why you can see all the rows in a line. You can go diagonal, and they all look the same diagonally.
It's quite incredible, isn't it? Because when you do go walking in across the fields and loads of vines, and it's so neat. Yeah. It's not like when you're in Greece or in an Italian island where it's sort of all in more rugged terrain and things like that. It's amazing. And we've all watched Jeremy Clarkson and seen his tractors and gizmos and everything. So
I must say, I was watching that and it was a little too real. It really was. I remember the very first episode when he got his first equipment and he had to connect it on the back of his tractor. I had exactly the same conversation with the guy who supplied it. He goes, "Here's your sprayer," and I go, "How do I attach this?" And the poor guy, he must have looked at me going, "What are you doing?"
Oh,
but he had to put it together. But it's just, the viticultural stuff. I've been working in wine for on and off about a decade or so. So
let's walk and talk now, Will, because you're going to take us now to some other vines that are being probably more advanced. So how did you get involved in all of this?
So I graduated from university. How old am I now? About 12 years ago, and I studied archaeology, so lots of outdoors, still digging, getting your feet and your hands muddy. But this was after the economic recession and all that stuff happened, and English Heritage was one of the first to stop hiring. So you had to start thinking creatively, saying, "Oh, what was I really good at university?" And it's like, well, I quite liked wine. Try and compare a bit of that. So looking for jobs, and I came across was it Majestic Wine? They have a graduate scheme there, and they basically train you all up, get your basic wine knowledge. They put you through these WSET qualifications, is what they call them. I will go this way, shall we?
Yeah.
And it really, really just kick-started a passion for it, really did. And from then I've worked in various different jobs, some of them wine, most of them wine, but some of them not. So I've worked in marketing, PR, advertising, market research, that was pharmaceuticals, and as well as several other wine businesses. And I did a stint in Ogbins. There's a local wine specialist shop in Horsham, which I worked in. It's called a Horsham Cellar. It's a great shop, that one. And there's several places in the UK where we are. In Sussex is actually fantastic for learning about viticulture, because we've got Plumpton School, which has a wine department, which I've studied at, and he basically teaches you the more agricultural side of it, because I know the actual beverage, but learning how to do it actually make it in the ground and make it in the winery as well, it takes a little bit of knowledge.
A lot of knowledge. Let's be honest. So you did all that study, and then you got to get a bit. If you decide to do it yourself and start your own business, you got to have the land and everything. So what was your next step?
Well, we were quite fortunate that we had this land. It's as in the family and all that. So basically we had to do a lot of testing. So we do have consultants that help us with the more scientific and technical stuff, as most vineyards do. Even if you go to Bordeaux, there are famous consultants who help Bordeaux winemakers and viticulturalists there. And we did a test on the land, because otherwise you have to buy it, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to buy land in Sussex. And found out, it's great. There's just a couple of things we have to do, which we knew we'd have to do, which is like sort of setting out the trellising how we have. So this is what's called vertical shoot positioning. So we actually go a bit higher. So it's quite funny you mentioned it's different in France when you go to places like that, because they do a thing called, in Southern Rhone, they do it differently everywhere. They do a thing called bush training, and that's because they don't get so much frost. So we have to train our vines to go high to miss the ground frost. But it also means that you can make mechanisation a lot easier. But we're not really planning on doing mechanisation, but it means everything's in order, and it makes it a lot quicker to do any work inside the vineyard. So this is more Pinot Noir. We've got a lot of Pinot Noir in our vineyard at the moment. But if we, I tell you, we'll go a little bit across and we'll go up the rows, and we can have a little close-up look at some of them if you'd like.
Yeah. So Will, you were lucky to have this land in the family. So did you just sort of come to sit around the table with your dad with a bottle of wine and say, Dad, we've got a lot of fields doing nothing here. I've had this idea.
You surprisingly spot on with the wording. It was, they were. We had occasional sheep on here that we'd let graze, but it seemed like an utter travesty that we had these fields not doing anything. We're just cutting the grass, and England, especially the south of England, especially Sussex, is just becoming renowned for winemaking. And I say, before we did anything, we had to test it just to make sure that we could make top quality grapes that we're really interested in making. And when that all came back positive, it was like, well, we've got to do it now, haven't we? But
and did your family embrace it as well? Were they up for the challenge?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They're I mean, they're still. We're all still learning so much about it. But everyone's like super excited. I mean, I've got my brother's in fields over there. He's currently doing a bit of weed control with a strimmer, so he's helping out. And everyone helps out as and when they can. So, for instance, we've got to do a thing called tucking in, which these ones aren't quite ready for yet. But when they get longer, they tend to droop over. So it's like going on a walk, but you've got something you need to do. Why must you doing it?
Yeah. But let's, I mean, we're here on a lovely day. There might be a little bit of rain threat, but we've had everything from heavy rain, heat, and of course, as you said, the dreaded frost.
Oh, yeah.
That, sort of you have to manage. So, like for you, with your young, vines, and being new really to the marketplace, because how long have you been going now?
4 weeks we've had our first product on the market. So we're very, very new.
So you're very new. So what is the fear factor for you?
I mean, for these vines, when you have heavy rain on and off in sun like we've had this year's been an incredibly hard year actually for managing disease control and weed control. And basically because it's been so wet, we can't really take the tractors in between, because unlike other types of farming like wheat or something, we've got to drive. You can see the tire marks where we've got to drive down every single row, which you get a thing called compaction. And that can, basically, because we're on clay's great for red wine grapes. So Pinot Noir, fantastic. It's got really high mineral count. Yeah. But it also means that you squish it down and it traps water, and that adds to disease pressure on the vine. So we've been having to hand weed basically for the past 4 weeks. So as soon as we launched, we also had this problem that we had to do quite a lot of intense work in the vineyard. So it's been an interesting year in the rain in that sense. I mean, you really have to get very dry for vines to get dehydrated. It's called water stress, they call it. But it also happens that it's incredibly wet. So it's always a challenge in the UK, absolutely.
So do you find that you're attracted to that challenge? I mean, a bit like, a sailor out at sea and judging every day with the wind, or a fisherman, what's the weather going to be like, and are there going to be storms or whatever? Is that an attractive part of your day?
That's a fantastic metaphor, because it really is like that. you can't plan your year and just say, oh yeah, we'll do this then and do that then, because we're especially in England and the UK, we're at the behest of the weather. We really, really are. In the Mediterranean, something like that, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be decent weather. So for them, it's about managing their time and sort of making sure they can optimise their yields and all that. But for us, it's surviving it through. I mean, the benefits we do get from that, we have a longer season, and it takes a longer time for the grapes to reach maturity. And we're kind of right at the edges of the world, really, where you can grow it. So it means you get a longer time for things called polyphenols to develop inside the grapes, and you can get really interesting and complex flavours from it because you're doing that. It's a bit like people on the fringes of society, really. They're more interesting.
You know what? You're absolutely right, Will. Yes, exactly.
So the reason I've taken you here is this is where our winery is going to be. We should be breaking ground in, I'd say, about a month or so.
And just for our listeners now, we are sort of come to the edge of where the vines are growing, and it's just a bit of field with trees around it, and so it's got potential.
Absolutely, it's got potential, and the plan is we're going to have it's going to take up pretty much a lot of this space here. We'll have a little bit of area where people can park and all that sort of stuff, but it's going to be a 2-storey high winery. So it's going to be 2 stories. There's going to be a mezzanine floor internally because the tanks go quite high, but that mezzanine floor is going to be on the 2nd floor, looking over to the downs over there. I think it's a fantastic view when you look over there. It's but we'll do tastings there, and that's where we'll do our tours, and basically we'll be based out of there instead of the shed down there, because that's a bit of a intermittent sort of stage we're at. But as soon as we get this done, we can start producing the wine here, because we're currently using a contract maker. He's using a recipe that I've developed with him for the sparkling wine, which we'll talk about later.
Yes. Oh yes, we've got that. We're going. Yes, the sparkling wine to come. So, I mean, just in saying that, I mean, of course, you have produced your first product, the sparkling wine. What are your ambitions for what to grow?
For what to grow?
What to grow and wine to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. So this, I'll talk about the one we've got now and then talk about the other ones. I'll do it in chronological order. Because a lot of it is time, decades in winemaking. So this first one we have is, we produce it in a method called the Sharmat Method, which is basically, you've got traditional method wine, which is what England and Champagne are famous for, on Sharmat, which you've probably drunk it if you had Prosecco. They use the same method there. So we make our base wine, and then we put it into a pressurised tank, and then you do the secondary fermentation where you put sugar and yeast into that tank, and with fermentation comes CO2, and it puts the sparkles inside of it. Whereas with traditional method, they do that second fermentation where they add yeast and sugar inside a bottle. So you get more contact of yeast in traditional method, so you get more kind of yeasty. When people say, oh, it tastes like brioche or something like that, that's a traditional method, because you're getting that yeast flavour. Whereas Sharmat, because we get such brilliant fruit flavours in the UK, I thought, let's use this one because it really concentrates and focuses in on those fruity flavours, so you get a fruity but complex and really fresh sparkling wine from it. So that's our first one, the Sharmat one, and that's the one we actually operate as a negociant as well as a grower. So what a negociant is, they buy grapes from other people around the south. So we bought grapes around Sussex and Kent around the south, and then they make their own branded wine over it. So the one that we're going to try later is one that we basically scoured the whole of Sussex and Kent and the southeast of England, because it's a brilliant wine growing area. They found the best grapes we can for the style of wine we want to make, and then made it in a way that kind of promotes those fruit flavours and the freshness in it. So that's going to be really exciting when more people get to try it. But that's that one is called Boco by House Boco, and that's a blend of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and a grape variety called Reichensteiner, which really helps the other two because it gets a little bit of a higher sugar content, so it brings out the flavours of the other two. So it's a really interesting wine. It's got great length, and well, I'm not going to tell you about it. We'll try it a bit later.
But it is important to kind of know, sort of, which grapes you're using and what the percentage is there, because all of that, I think, when you are drinking a wine, and particularly if you're going to pay a bit more to have something produced in England, you want to engage with it.
Yeah.
It's not just going to the supermarket and going, oh great, there's one down to £6, yay!
Yeah.
And it's just drinking. It's the story behind it. And the tasting notes, which is really key.
Oh, absolutely. And this style of wine we're making with the Boco, we're on the first in the UK to be doing it. I think we're one of the first, I should say. And one of the things that we're doing different to everyone else is that we're really we're not doing it because we see it as a cheaper way or a more expensive way or a more premium way. We're doing the method that we think is going to make the best wine for the grapes that we've got. So everything has been really carefully selected, and like how we make it has been carefully decided. And what we've done with this Boco we've got is I've treated each grape individually. So a lot of times you get people, just press it and then ferment it and do it that way. But for instance, like we whole bunch press the Chardonnay, because you get the whole bunch pressing is where you leave it on the you get when you buy grapes from a shop, it comes in a whole bunch, whereas a lot of the time they crush and destem it, which is where you take the grapes off and then you press it and then you do it that way. So when you do it that way, you have to press it a little more aggressively so you can get more flavour and a little bit of colour out of it, whereas the whole bunch pressing, you press it a lot more delicately so you can preserve some of the more delicate flavours. So we've whole bunched with the Chardonnay, but we've crushed and destemmed with the Pinot Noir, because I really wanted to get a bit more of those fruity flavours coming through whilst preserving the finesse that you often get with Chardonnay and that sort of complexity you get with it. And we've also crushed and destemmed the Reichensteiner, because we're trying to squeeze as much out of that as possible. So it's just about treating every grape variety individually so you can get the best from them and make the best quality wine you can. So another thing that we do, which when especially with making Sharmat is a little different, is we use the free run. The first pressings, second and the third pressings use the whole pressings of the grape, and what that means is you get the later pressings, you get your kind of fruit kicks, but the earlier pressings is where you get, I say once again, your more interesting, more subtle flavours, and by mixing them all together you get the flavour that you're looking for, but you also get the complexity at the same time. So we're trying to make a premium product with something that, and just using with something that other people don't think to do it, but it really, really is, and it's really exciting, and I can't wait for you to try it.
Oh, I can't wait. And just, with all that you said there, and you're just so clearly passionate about everything that you're doing, and with the methodology behind you making your product, is this something you were able to, it was naturally part of the teaching at Plumpton, or was this further work on your own behalf with experimentation?
This has been from years working in the wine industry and basically drinking a lot. I mean, I say it like that, but the best way to get your palate in and understand wine is I like to call it active drinking. Whereas it's a bit like when you listen casually and you don't really think about what the person's saying. But if you actively listen, or if you actively taste something, in your mind you're going, it's got that, and it's got that, and it's got that, and it's also got this length, and look at the clarity. You're making a mental note of what you're tasting, and after doing that for quite a few years, you start honing in on different things, and you start picking up on different techniques that have made that flavour come through. And I've sort of harvested things from all around the world, going, I think we should do this and this and this, and mixing and matching. So I'm not going to say hard work, but it's been a lot of work.
Well, it takes a lot of focus and dedication for that active drinking, and you'll be able to teach us that active drinking and help us, because it's always a journey, whenever we're tasting. And yes, I'll have had a lot of wine in my time to drink as well too, but sometimes it's a bit frustrating when you don't always detect what it says that you're going to detect in the drink. And of course we all have our own taste buds, and it can be subjective as well too. And
that's what makes it so much fun, the fact that it is subjective, and it's people describing a taste, which is it's challenging in itself, but it's half the fun, like seeing what people come up with, because it's all recollection. It's all about something that you've tasted in the past and you're comparing it, because that's how, as humans, we find it easiest to communicate what taste is, by comparing it to what we've had. I mean, my favourite tasting that I have ever had for it was an Italian Valpolicella, where someone said, it tastes like cherry bakewells, and I was like, that's exactly what it tastes like. I love it when people give notes like that.
Wines.
Yeah, and I love it too. I really, really do. But it's one of the big things that we're really, really keen on, is just to be kind of not snobby about wine tasting, because at the end you do it for fun. It's something you do for pleasure. It's something that you enjoy doing. And as soon as you start being exclusive and saying, oh no, these are the notes that you've got to find, and if you don't know your left bank from your right bank Bordeaux's, then what you're talking about, it doesn't matter. If you're enjoying it and you can just share your experience with it, that's what counts, and that's what the fun is. And that's something we're really keen on, just sort of not being stuck in old ways and just being new and inclusive. I think it's really important for me, for the wine industry, really, really important. And you can see it going that way, which makes me happy. There's a great variety called Frühburgunder. The Germans call it Frühburgunder. Frühburgunder. I love calling it Frühburgunder.
Yeah, tell us about that.
The French call it Pinot Noir Precoce, and we call it New Pinot Noir. So I like to call it Frühburgunder. But it's a cousin of Pinot Noir, so it's quite closely related to it, but it's a little bit lighter, and it does a little better a little further up. So and you get quite light strawberry flavours from it when you have it in a wine. But not like having a strawberry drink or anything like that, but it's got a little bit of that red fruit from it. I've had some incredible red wines made from it. So Frühburgunder, under English quality wine rules, can be used to colour rosé, basically, so you can make your wine and use a little bit of Frühburgunder to give it a nice pink hue to it. But I actually think you make fantastic red wine from it. So as soon as we have a year that's good enough, I would like to make a red wine from that Frühburgunder. And until then,
you do like a challenge. A good
red
wine from England.
I think there are a couple doing it quite well.
Okay, all right. But it is a hard one. It's a hard nut.
I mean, I do like Burgundian wines and like German red wines actually. Yeah. So the lighter and style ones. You're never going to get your Amarones or your Zinfandels or Cabernet Sauvignons in the UK, but you can make really interesting, very, very light kind of wines with like quite a nice tannic structure and a bit of complexity, but you can only do it when the year has been a very good year, basically. So you have to keep an eye out on it and make a call if you're going to make more rosé or more red wine. Well,
you see, there's where the excitement comes in, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
The challenge, like watching the wind conditions, really. Is it going to be the right year? And that's whenever there's such excitement, isn't there? When people go, that was the year, or this is the year. And
it's so obvious and not obvious, so clear in English winemaking we've had a good year, because you'll see a flurry of red wines going. It's not like, you will have a great vintage as well, but you'll see a couple of red wines creep in there and go, it really was a good year if people are able to do it. So you can actually see people changing their offerings depending on the quality of the vintage, as opposed to saying, that was a great vintage, and us having to believe them. It's there's a real change from it. But you got the Frühburgunder we had there, and we also I didn't take you to there, we've got Pinot Meunier as well, which is another red variety. It's called Meunier because it's French from Miller, and it's got like a little furry coat on the leaves and stuff, and it looks like it's covered in flour. So that's why it's Pinot Meunier. But that's used in the Champagne region as well, much like the grape variety we're in front of now, which is Pinot Blanc, which is a lesser known Champagne varietal. So this is a white grape varietal which you can use along with Chardonnay to make Blanc de Blanc sparkling wine, which is what our intention is for this particular field. So we'll be making Blanc de Blanc from here, and we'll be aging it on its lees. So the lees are the dead yeast cells I was talking about earlier, which impart that brioche flavour. We'll be aging on the fine lees. In my mind, I've got about 7 years to 8 years in my mind, which is quite a long time, but we have the acidity in the UK. Acidity helps with stabilisation of wine. It also helps with fresh flavours, and if you have enough of it, it basically means you can do a lot with it, because it means your wine's not going to degrade over time, so you can do all these different processes with it. I think it's one of the secret hidden powers of English wine, is that because we have such great acidity, you can do so much with it. And we'll make a Blanc de Noir, because I love Blanc de Noir. I just love the flavours you get from it with the Pinot Meunier and the Pinot Noir over there. And you'll taste a little bit of what I'm talking about with the Boco by House Boco, the sparkling wine we've got at the moment. But that's technically, if you were to call it anything, that would be a classic cuvee, a blend of white and red. But the red does come through in it. But so we've got a Blanc de Noir, we've got a Blanc de Blanc, we're going to have a rosé or a red wine, and we've got Boco by House Boco, which is our Sharmat style one. So that's where I'm at the minute. We'll see. there's a phrase in English wine, well, there's a phrase in wine in general, and it depends. Everything changes. Something could happen and you go, well, we best do that now. So it's a bit like, dealing with the weather. You've got to change. You've got to be able to change your plans if it doesn't work out how you expected it to, or if you hear something and go, this is done really, really well. So I look at the Pinot Noir in that field and going, that's growing so well. We'll just have to see what the future holds for it. So.
Okay. Yes, walking through the vines at night with your cocoa and just tucking them all in, checking your babies are comfortable.
Oh, you're attached. You're attached to them when you start naming them as you're working with them. I'm pretty sure Phil's down there somewhere.
Oh dear, well, with over 30,000 vines, my word. Could you run out of names? Do you think?
I have to find out how many names there are. You have to get some very, very interesting ones, to start taking fictional ones.
Oh, Grady says, get the kettle on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great sign language going on. But this is the nightmare in broadcasting, is wherever you go and you think, I'm in the countryside, it's going to be quiet. Not really. So it's quite, we've come to the part really of our tour around your vineyard, to a field of vines, and this one is quite special.
Yeah, this was our very first field planted. So this is a Chardonnay. I got a special place at this field. It's the warmest field we've got. It was the first one we did. It's something special about Chardonnay. It's a tricky one to grow, but when you get it right, it really is very good. And this one is, I'd say, about 5,000 vines along those lines. And this is the first row, and the very first vine was planted at the gate. The very end of this row as well. Oh. So it was when that vine went in, and you're going, oh, it's real, it's actually happening. You're kind of tied into.
Did you have a little flag to stake in the ground and a bottle to celebrate that moment?
I did have a drink with it. I did have a glass of wine. It was.
You deserve it. Yeah. It's a big moment.
A lot of planning had gone into that. So before that first vine went in the ground, it was about 2 to 3 years worth of planning, organising, figuring out how we're going to do this, the actual logistics of it, doing like analysis of the ground, knowing what rootstocks we're going to put onto it. So I touched on the rootstocks there. All these vines, they're all grafted, so there's a different species of grape-bearing vine to the rootstock that we've got on top of it. But I can show you. Sorry to run away from you.
Run off there. I'll run behind you with my microphone. Okay, so we're having a little look at this. Okay, show us. Yeah, that's right.
So
Row 1, Chardonnay, 96/01-14.
So the House Boco is the vineyard here. Row 1, this is the first row we have, Chardonnay Varietal, and that's the clone of Chardonnay. So Chardonnay's got a whole bunch of different clones. So the way that you propagate vines is you take cuttings and then you plant those cuttings, and you get very slight changes as it goes along, just because of where it's been cut, and basically it's very small genetic changes. When you breed another vine, that's when you get another type of vine, basically, called hybrids along those lines. But that's the clone, so that's the type of cutting that it's come from. And at 10114 is the rootstock that it's been grafted onto. Now we have to graft all our vines onto rootstocks because it started a couple hundred years ago when they started bringing vines back from America. And they brought back a pest called phylloxera. It's called the Great Phylloxera outbreak, and it wiped out all the vines in France and Spain and everything. It was a massive disaster. In fact, I think they had a million, what today's money, £1 million prize for someone to try and fix the problem that's killing all of Europe's vines. And the way they came around it, was that they took the American vines that took the phylloxera over, cut off the roots, and they grafted basically a jigsaw puzzle piece, the European vines onto it. So then the roots were immune against this disease, but you still had the high quality grapes growing on the actual vine, so you can still create your top quality wine, and that's what we still do to this day. They have made a couple of hybrids where they crossbreed European and American varieties, and some of them are quite good, but there's a bit of hesitance to do it across the world, just because the European varieties are so well known and popular, and people have a taste of them. But yeah, I think there's a lot of future in these hybrid varieties. We just need a bit of a cultural change in the wine world for people to start accepting them.
You mentioned there, and just for everyone listening, really, you mentioned that Chardonnay is a bit tricky to grow compared to some other varieties.
It's quite thin-skinned. So when you've got the grapes are, I should say. So when you have thin skins, kind of disease like powdery and downy mildew can attack the grapes and be quite damaging. And a thing called botrytis, which is when you have a fruit bowl and your fruit starts going mouldy, that's botrytis. It's everywhere. It's part of the circle of life. But we don't want it until we've harvested all the grapes and pressed it. Then it can do its thing. So that's another problem you have with thinner ones. It's a little bit more susceptible to, let's say, weather and disease stress. And in the UK, disease stress is one of the big things that we need to stay on top of. So it's challenging to grow. Pinot Noir, it's a little easier, but it's also still challenging to grow. But it's very, very similar to Chardonnay. So what you'll find is that wherever you can grow Pinot Noir, you can also grow Chardonnay, because and that's why they go so well together in a classic cuvee blend. But yeah, they're very, very similar. Things like Meunier is a little easier. Pinot Blanc is meant to be a little easier, but we've had a lot of fun with that one. And Fruit Burgundy, I think, is our easiest to grow that we have here, but it's kind of more suited to the area.
Okay, lovely. And it has a lovely cosy feel because it is surrounded by trees completely, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something we really wanted to keep that. You go to so many vineyards and you go where it could be anywhere in the world. But something I'm quite proud of here is that you can definitely tell we're in England. We've got oak trees surrounding all the thing. It's actually really beneficial to us as well because it acts as a windbreak. So when you start, we do get winds from the Atlantic coming up, and the downs do protect us a little bit. But if you have too much wind, it can damage the vine. So you want about a little technical, about 60% porosity in your windbreaks. And the oak trees, and we've got a couple of alder as well. They really help keep it down, but keep it moving as well, because you don't want it to stop altogether, because that's when disease can really be a problem. So it helps, a nice gentle breeze at all times, which is
there you go. The wind
ideal.
is playing a part. It's not just on the sea. And of course the biodiversity as well, with the wildlife that's growing around anywhere. We've got these beautiful big old oak trees, and it's nice that you are in tune and using nature all around you.
Well, we've never had to do a insecticide sort of control or anything like that, just because when you walk down, you'll see almost every vine's got a ladybird on it, so they take care of the aphids for us, and we have quite a lot of like birds, different variety of birds that get rid of the smaller pests like that. So I've seen a hawk, we've got loads of buzzards here, and we've got a lot of the smaller birds as well that eat the bugs off the vines as well. So yeah, I've been quite keen not to mess around with nature around us, because it does have an equilibrium and a balance to it, and at the moment we've been quite lucky with that, but you just have to monitor it and manage it and keep on top of it.
Somebody told me a really interesting fact at the weekend, it's just randomly coming to my head, that that birds here in the UK eat about between like 35 and 40 billion caterpillars.
That's an incredible fact. But
who counts all that? That's what I want to know.
That's a very long weekend.
Wonderful. So, and aren't you sort of blessed with having the name William Corran? Because the House of Corran, is it Corran or Corran?
Corran, C-O-R-A.
So the House
Corran.
House Corran is a really lovely name for your business, isn't it? For your estate.
We started with Corran Wine Limited, and I think it's got a bit of a better ring to it.
Oh, definitely. Without a shadow of a doubt. Even just pulling in up the drive.
I did want a Robin Reliant that said Corran Wine Limited. I could wear. But it's it took a lot of thought about it, and we wanted to, instead of going for the name of the area we're in, or the name of sort of the street or the village or something along those lines, or to have some sort of heraldic thing, we thought, no, it's our family that's doing it. So it is our house, that we all of us grew up in that house as well. So it's our house and it's our surname. So we thought, well, I think we're totally entitled to call it House Corran.
I think it is great. It is great. Lovely. So, do you think it's time we go and take a little taste.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I've got a dry mouth.
Oh, let's go. So, Will, we're just, when we think about the land here in West Sussex that you're based, and it's so lovely, but of course it is steeped in history. So what do you know about the land?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'll link it to viticulture as well. Drainage is really, really, really important in viticulture because you don't want standing water. It has disease happening, makes disease sort of go rife. So all around the outside, we've got these giant ditches that kind of help take the cold air and the water as well. But really interestingly, the first sort of drainage work done on here was during the Napoleonic period, when French prisoners of war were taken from the battlefield here and stored here. But instead of doing nothing, they were put to work. So they actually put in Napoleonic land drains, and we've got the French army to thank for that. So the French really have helped us making our wine here just several hundred years ago, or 200 years ago, thereabouts. But yeah, there's lots of interesting stuff like in the whole area here. So before we had this used to be a shooting ground, and used to drive tanks around, and it was all activities. And before then, it's been a vegetable farm. It was used for the land army, used it in World War II to help provide food. It's been a cattle farm as well. It's had legumes on it, which are fantastic for vines. If you have legumes anywhere on a vineyard, you're doing quite well. And before then, it was all part of that was a Hoggett's farm. It was part of an estate that used to be a deer park. So there's a lot of hunting around here. And I think it even goes back to Domesday Book, where it was part of a really large deer park that took up pretty much the whole area going down Stane Street, and then on the A281, sort of that massive chunk was all for royal hunting of deer and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's the land's been used for getting close to 1,000 years that we know of. It was probably used before as well, but yeah, we do. I do take interest in it because of my background as an archaeologist, and we've had metal detectors coming down, and they found lots of interesting stuff like musket balls and a lot of rounds and cartridges and stuff like that. We've had a couple of coins found here as well, so it's just always keeping an eye out for stuff in the ground and like just knowing locally what's been going on.
Okay, so I can sense another dilemma coming on. You have plans to grow a grape that you're excited about growing, and you've a piece of land dedicated to it, and then you discover that there's potentially something really exciting there, archaeologically wise. What are you going to do?
I've been on the other side of that coin. I've been a contract archaeologist before who's put a hold on people's buildings. I felt awful, but usually there for about a week or so, digging it up, just making sure there's nothing there. Nothing like, black prints means you found under a car park or anything along those lines. But yeah, you'd have to tell someone about it if you found something, or if you're doing building work or anything along those lines. And then I really firmly believe that you got to investigate it fully and make sure that you know what's going on, because archaeology is a destructive process. In the process of excavating something, you're destroying the land around it. So you're destroying the stratigraphy, which is the different layers, so you can age and date things, which is really important, because if you find the same layer somewhere, then you can date something elsewhere to that same geological layer. So yeah, you've absolutely got to take the time and care to preserve local heritage, well, the English heritage as well. But I don't think it would stop us planting permanently. It might. I think the worst that would happen is it would set you back a year, unless it was something really, really important. Like if they found a stone ring here, I'd want to. I wouldn't plant on that. How could you?
Put some tables and chairs around
Well,
it and
absolutely.
tell your story to people who pay to come and drink wine and have a wine tour.
We'd have a great summer solstice.
You certainly would. That's great. That's lovely. Now, here we are. We're sitting. I just love your little shed, Will, and your little tables and chairs around it. It really feels, it has an allotment feel. It's remember these days, because I know you're going to build the lovely big winery eventually, but there's just something very lovely about your little garden shed with the seating around it.
Well, it's the House Coram garden shed, so every house has got to have a garden shed.
I just love it. Now, here we go, the taste test, and we're looking at the bottle. Now, of course, Boco, it sort of has, it's a derives from Old English, which derives from French, which comes from Bocuse, produced in England on the label. Now, for your label, it just thinking it's got the silver, it's got some bright colours, it's got orange and pink in there. It's quite modern, contemporary, as opposed to traditional sort of style of topography that you would see.
This is something
possibly.
We're really, really keen to do, and I'm really pleased that your assessment says young and modern. We wanted to make something that was accessible, and we didn't want people to think that it was kind of like the same old thing and, you know, a bit traditional and in its branding and all that stuff. It is young, it is new, and it is different. And the other really big thing for me is I wanted the label and the packaging to really give you an idea of what it was going to taste like, because it's a bit like when you order something from a restaurant, like you eat something with your eyes before you actually eat it. It's a bit like a bottle of wine. You get little suggestions from the label on the bottle of what it's going to be like inside, and sort of giving whoever's drinking it as many clues as they can as to what it's going to taste like. I think it's really, really important. But the other thing we want to do, just because it's got so many of those fruit flavours, and you can translate them to different like colours, we wanted to go for sort of a kaleidoscope sort of feel. So I don't know if you can pick up on that sort of the different squares within diamonds, within squares, and we wanted to make something that looked really pretty as well.
Yeah,
so,
no, it does. I mean, it does stand out. I mean, if you're going to look at a shelf, that stands out as a label. Who designed it for you?
So we had a freelance graphic designer, a wonderful designer called Sammy Brennan, and she worked with us to help do the design. So it took a long time to do it, to make sure we got it right. And she's a great illustrative designer, and she likes patterns as well. So so we got the little patterns inside here, and that's just the bouquet thing tessellating. So I think tessellation was a big factor on it. But yeah, the main thing was showing that it's a fun drink, it's a fruity drink, it's got a lot going on with it, and it's something new. We wanted to stand out, quite rightly so. So
fun and fruity.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say it's just fun and fruity, because it's got a little bit of a serious note to it, because of the amount that's got going on in it. But it's not snobby at all. It's confident. But not snobby. I like.
Okay, confident, not snobby. And I like your little label that you have swinging from its neck like a little medallion. Living life to its fullest and a toast to adventure. And that's what it's all about by House Boco. Okay, well listen, crack open, Will.
All righty. All right. Oh.
This is where we see your skills, and will it pop just right?
There we are.
No waste there.
No waste.
No big pop. No waste. The smelly are coming out there. And just thinking as you're pouring, have you ever done that party trick where you stack a whole load of glasses in a pyramid and pour from the top?
I haven't yet. In fact, until very recently, I don't think I had enough wine to be able to do that with the glasses. I'd like to try it. Maybe on New Year's at some point.
Yeah.
But you have to get those the champagne saucers, I think, to
you do
the wine saucers, because
important.
Otherwise it becomes incredibly tricky to stack them.
Yeah,
and it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
I have opened it with sword before. That was quite fun.
Oh, excellent! Yes. And have you had a bath in champagne?
Not yet.
Not yet.
And ambition, maybe. Cheers.
Cheers, or sláinte. Lovely. So the lovely little bubbles floating up to the top, which is gorgeous, from the middle of the base of the glass upwards and round the side. So it's always a pleasure, isn't it, looking at the little bubbles? I love that. And holding it on the stem. Okay, so do your bit now with the tasting notes, Will.
Well, the first thing you need to look at is the colour. So, the very, very first thing you do when you do a systematic thing is you make sure that it's clear, and it's definitely clear. There's no cloudiness in here at all. And then you look at the colour. And so you can see that we've used Pinot Noir in it, because it's got, I'd say, almost a platinum sort of colour to it. It's not perfectly white. It's kind of got a little bit of a hue to it. If I was to give that, I think a platinum, almost slightly rusty maybe. colour to it, but not too much. Still definitely a white wine. So once you're happy with the colour and it looks like it's not faulty or anything like that, you can give it a good old sniff. And I suppose you tell me what you get on off the bat on the nose.
Well, on the nose for me, I'm definitely getting that fruitiness, and I'm sort of feeling I'm in apples, and that's what I'm getting.
See, I get a very, very small first hit of a little bit of red fruit, like almost a little bit of raspberry, maybe strawberry, but then that gives way quite right to apples, and then I get a little bit of almost pear to it as well.
Pear.
Yeah.
That is absolutely, now that you've said that, that's that sweetness from the pear, which is very different to getting it from an apple.
And now you get to do the fun bit, get to give it a go.
You've got your own very distinct taste here.
Yeah.
You really do. It's lovely.
I mean,
and I'm not just saying that, but it is lovely, and I wasn't expecting it to have its own unique flavour.
Oh, thank you very much. It's something we've been trying really hard to get. We wanted something that kind of stood out, but was still drinkable and fresh. And when the sun comes out, you can just go for it more and more. I would say have a couple of sips before kind of going through it, because you've got the acidity, which is what is making it so fresh, and you'll kind of get acclimatized to it, and you'll be able to taste what's behind it as well. I mean, don't be put off by the acidity. It's hard to describe it without tasting it, but it makes it very clean cut and like easy drinking. But I get very similar to what I got on the nose, but maybe a little bit more of the red fruit. And I also get, I don't know if you get this as well, I get a bit of grapefruit on the length as well.
I would agree, because of you're kind of getting 3 different stages of the taste when you're drinking it, from the front to the back of the tongue, and that last note that you said, yes, definitely,
that's the sort of the one that carries it
through.
And I've had this followed by another sparkling wine made in a similar way. And after drinking, I had a bottle of that, and then I had a bottle of that one. It was an experiment. We needed to see what it tasted like next to it. I still had the finish on this one after having another bottle of a different wine. It just keeps on going. It's that the flavour you can taste after you've drunk it, and you can see how long it lingers in your mouth for. When it lingers for a long time, that's usually a sign of quite a high quality wine. So it's what we were aiming for, and I'm quite pleased with this one. I think we've achieved it.
So you exactly, you get a lot more for your money then.
Absolutely.
The flavours last on. Now, I mean, I think for listeners as well too, what we know, I mean, if we're going to spend a little bit more on having our sparkling wine because we want to support English, and with your wine in particular, when is it good to drink it? Is it good to have it just on its own? Should you, if you were doing a toast at a celebration, when should you have this? Beginning of the evening, the end of the evening, through the evening? I
mean, of course, I would say you have it all the time. And it's funny you should bring up the weddings, because we've got quite a few weddings asking exactly that question. Do you have it when people arrive, or should you have it on the toasts? And part of me is thinking it's so fresh and it's got so many things going on that if you have it when you get to the toasts, usually people have had quite a few other drinks, so you can't really appreciate it as much. I mean, this is the old Majestic coming out of helping people with their weddings. So you can have your really nice sparkling wine when people turn up, because if you want people to appreciate it, or if you want to make a statement, you can have it during your toasts. Or you can have it just on your top table and let everyone else have something that's a little less. That's something else we did. But I think it goes brilliantly as an aperitif. It's got that freshness, and it's got the fruit, so it goes really well with canapes or even like charcuterie, something along those lines. I had it with pizza. It went fantastically with pizza.
Oh, nice.
But I love pizza. So
okay, yeah.
I've had a couple of sommeliers from Michelin star restaurants. We're actually in Michelin star restaurants now, who think for starters and dessert, sort of like an Eton mess. They thought, it would be fantastic with something like that, a really fruity dessert that would go brilliantly well with it. And it can stand up to, You've got to be careful with sugar in desserts and wine, because usually you want to have a wine that's got more sugar, because you can get lost in the sugar of the dessert. But with this one, because it's got that freshness and it's got the powerful flavours and quite a few of them, it can stand up to it without being sweet. So this wine's technically Brut. So Brut is the driest, apart from being something called Brut Nature, where you have no dosage. Dosage is what you put in at the end of doing a secondary fermentation, and it basically helps balance the wine. And typically higher quality wines have lower dosage because they don't need to cover up their mistakes. But because this is a high quality one, we've used a lot less sugar, so it's still technically Brut.
Oh no, it's great. And I had actually, over the weekend, I had this yearn for gooseberries. My mum used to have gooseberry bushes and make gooseberry jam, but there is a lovely variety now which is a sweet, you don't need to really cook it up with sugars, sort of a red skinned. And I'm just thinking, because I've been having it with yogurt, just to have those sweet gooseberries actually as part of a dessert with this. That's just something telling me that would be lovely.
It's not a pairing you'd normally expect to do, but it does kind of work. But this is once again going back to having fun with wine. This is half the fun of it. You know, you drink wine, you go, that would be great with that. I remember when we did this, you go, get some strawberries, let's see what it's like with strawberries, and you can play around with it, and that's really, it's another reason why I love wine. you can do your own inventions and your own pairings. And
it's so sociable as well, isn't it? Because everybody can talk about it, can share it.
Yeah,
you know, sharing a bottle is something lovely. Isn't
it really is, and you know, everyone can taste. You know, it's not. I think you should never feel excluded from enjoying wine and using your own language to explain it. I mean, when there are words that people use time and time again, but you know, the most powerful and the best ones are your own words for describing wine, and that's something I really encourage everyone to say. It's just use your own words and have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely, delicious, more please. Simple words, just say it all, don't they? That's great. Now, it's £26 a bottle. Where can people buy?
They can buy it from the website online. So that is the same price online, the same price everywhere else you do it. And we endeavour to get it to you within 7 days, but we can do it it's usually between 2 to 3 days that we get it to you. We're stocked in the Horsham cellar in Horsham as well. They're the same price. That's in there. It's a great wine shop. If you haven't been there, I'll definitely give it a go. And I think that's where we're stocked at the moment. We're looking to expand, and we're also in a restaurant Tristan, so that's definitely worth a visit. And I think as far as wine and restaurant pairings go, their ethos is so similar to us. It's like, yes, it's incredibly good food, yes, they have a Michelin star, but it's kind of easy and it's not snobby or anything.
And
it's very welcoming.
Where is Restaurant Tristan?
Yeah, Restaurant Tristan's in Horsham. Yeah.
Okay, and have you talked to Steve of Etch, who's at South Lodge? He's currently taken over there at the moment, because he's about to reopen Etch in Hove, probably the end of September. He's revamped it, but he's taken over South Lodge.
I have to get him there.
Yeah.
Well, they're just down the road from us.
They
as
are.
well.
Steve, go and give him a call. Yeah, have him out. Lovely.
Yeah. But as I say, we launched this product 4 weeks ago. It's incredibly early days, and you know, if you want to be an early adopter, now is the time to do it.
Now is the time to do it.
And it is different to anything else in the market. It's made in a different way. The ethos behind it is just different. It's if you want to try something new, I'd say this is a great one to start with.
So you mentioned there about being an early adopter. Have you got schemes? Are you looking for, crowdfunding, community involvement?
We're looking to be involved in the community. I have an aspiration for, especially this area, Horsham, where we are, where I think we should be encouraging wine tourism. We've got fantastic vineyards all around us, and just the area for viticulture is creating such good wine. And I kind of want Horsham to be the Wren of the southeast, so people coming and doing tours of vineyards and supporting all these local businesses, because they are fantastic and they've got so much going on for them. And I think if we can really push that as a community, I remember I've spoken to like various people, and everyone seems, especially like in council and part of the developing Horsham especially, and everyone seems so up for it. And we've got such a good culinary background in Horsham as well.
For sure.
We've got I shouldn't mention competitors, but Leonardsley, they've got a Michelin star restaurant just there. Tristan's I've spoken about. We've got so many just incredible restaurants and pubs that like really top quality pubs that are doing food as well. I think it's a melting pot that's ready to explode just with this incredible food and drink tourism thing, and I think it's a really exciting time, so that's something we're quite keen to push. Regards to like just the community, the English wine community is so young, and I think it's just so important to be supporting everyone in it. And it's a great group to be part of, because they all do help each other. Like I'm part of Wine GB, it's called, and they've been an incredibly useful resource, and it's just people helping each other out. And it's because it's such a young and small industry, and you've got so many new things coming about. There are a couple of bigger players, but there are so many exciting things coming from the smaller producers as well. So yeah, it's all very exciting at the moment.
Lovely. Well, Will, it's been a pleasure. I think we've done a lot of talking, and we need to do more supping.
Absolutely.
Don't you? So cheers, and wish you all the very best.
Cheers.
With your endeavours.
Thank you very much for having me.